This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Rabbi, we are now going to try to complete the circuit, no pun intended, regarding the issue of electricity that we began Wednesday night. Really, we cannot say, with all honesty, we're going to complete the issue. It's a very, very vast, exhaustive issue. We're just going to address one last point. Let's just summarize very briefly, give you the executive summary to be able to get right into it. On Wednesday we learned that when electricity came out, there are those who are inclined to say perhaps it should be permitted, and namely the Marsham. Wow. The Marsham wanted to say, based on three reasons, two of them we'll mention right now, that perhaps electricity, even in an incandescent bulb, which Mr. Zolkin, I called him a few times on Wednesday, he explained to me in very clear terms how I could say it over. Hopefully I did it some justice. But the Marsham wanted to say why perhaps electricity should be permitted. Number one, he said, well, they didn't have electricity in the Mishkan. And number two, it's not really considered fire because it doesn't actually consume. And we addressed both of these issues from the Malamed Lahoyo and the Tzitz Eliezer. Number one, the fact that it's not in the Mishkan. So we said an amazing chiddush, that of all the Lamites Malachas, there's only one Malacha the Torah specifically talks about, and that is Loisabaru Eish, which comes to say that this Malacha, even if it's not similar to the Mishkan, you still can't do it. Mikol Makom. That's why the Torah says it explicitly. Loisabaru Eish. That was advanced by the Tzitz Eliezer, and he says Rabbi Pesach Frank said the same thing. And what about the fact that it doesn't burn and consume? It says the Tzitz Eliezer it doesn't consume. Try putting your paper on an electric stove, right? And you'll see, electric oven, you'll see how quickly it could burn. Oh, if it's not a real fire, it doesn't consume, stick a fork into the outlet. You'll see if it can make a real fire. And the only reason it's not consuming is only because of indirect atmospheric conditions. In other words, there's no oxygen there, it's a vacuum, right? So Mr. Zolkin explained to me that really the incandescent bulb, the filament, is actually hotter than the oven because it's white hot and not red hot. Fine. But in any event...
So does it consume?
So the Tzitz Eliezer says, in fact, it does have the properties of fire, it doesn't consume. It would be... Consume means the ability to burn something.
Burns?
To burn. It can burn. And they even said... They even said that actually... they make the case the filament does get slightly burnt. That's why eventually it goes out after at least... Let me talk. Okay, we're just reviewing, please. That's why eventually after 15,000 to 20,000 hours it goes out. That's debatable whether it actually consumes or some kind of... because of the stress, you explained to me, of the light bulb being turned on and off, heating and cooling, that's why it starts to malfunction. But in any event, the consensus of the poskim is it is Eish. Now, if it is Eish, can you do it on Yom Tif? Well, we know on Yom Tif you're not allowed to start a new fire on Yom Tif. So you say, maybe you're not starting a new fire because the electrical current was always there, you're just extending it. So we said, no, an electric current by itself is not a fire. It's only the incandescent bulb that's a fire. And to start it on Yom Tif probably would be an Isur Drabanan of Moiled. However, there are those who made the case that what? It's only a grama. It's only a grama. To which Reb Chaim Oizer Grzinski said the following lamdus, which is very clear and very important, that since the moment you complete the circuit, the electric current is waiting right there and goes the second you complete the circuit, that's not a grama, but that's an asiyah. Therefore on Shabbos it would be an Isur Dairaisa, and on Yom Tif it would be an Isur Drabanan. We said that's how we paskin. That was Wednesday's share in a nutshell. What we would like to discuss today, first I want to tell you a story. We mentioned the Marsham. If you read the Chuvas to the Marsham, you'll see a lot of things he writes, different things that came to him in dreams. So I have over here a story that Rav Shalom Shvadron, the Maggid from Yerushalayim, was the grandson of the Marsham. Marsham was, remember his name? Rav Shalom Mordechai HaKohen Shvadron. Rav Shalom Shvadron was, the Maggid of Yerushalayim was his grandson. He writes that he was looking over the notes of his Zayda, right? You know the books, the Maggid, Pesach Kron, right? The Maggid, that's Rav Shalom Shvadron. His grandfather, Marsham, wrote on a note, a Peladic dream that he had when he served as Rav in Barjan one Friday night. But And it was written there the following: that he had a dream. He was in the Bezdin Shamala, and he saw in the Bezdin Shamala that there was a young koilo guy in his community that was being judged by the Bezdin Shamala for having been Mechalo Shabbos. That this guy was Mechalo Shabbos, and the Marsham was watching how the Bezdin Shamala issued a decree that Chayiv Misa B'dei Shamayim. So he wakes up in the morning, he's very scared, he's startled, he doesn't know, should he tell the guy, should he not tell the guy about the dream? So he decides he's going to make the following siman. If this Avrech, if this Koilo guy comes over to him after the davening to talk and learning, he'll let him know about his dream. Sure enough, the davening's over, everybody's going home, and the Marsham is sitting there to learn extra, he's learning the Archaim HaKadosh on the Parsha, and the Koilo guy comes over to the Marsham, and he gives the Marsham a good Shabbos, and the Marsham says, do you have a minute? I want to talk to you about something. The Koilo guy begins to burst out into bitter tears. He said, Rebbe, last night, it was Friday, and I was learning Be'iyun Rav, Erev Shabbos. And how they used to learn? 150 years ago, they used to think smoking was healthy. They didn't, right? So they learned with the cigarette. And he got involved in the sugya. And the shkia comes. And he really looks at the clock. He's still smoking. He's so depressed. He doesn't know what to do. He's beside himself. He's Mechalo Shabbos. Daraisa. Doesn't know what to do. So Marsham tells him about the dream. By the way, I had a dream last night. So then he starts crying more. Bursts out into bitter tears. He says, Rebbe, what should I do? How should I do tshuva? So Marsham gave him the program for tshuva, the prescription for tshuva, and Lamaisa, the person lived for a long life. But anyway, back to the ranch, back to the fire over here.
Was he honest?
I don't know. I wasn't there. He got caught up in the sugya.
So why would he be?
It's good. It's a sugya. Tchilasa v'pshia v'soifa b'aynas. I don't know. Rabbi say, today we're going to discuss another aspect of electricity, not the Eish aspect. This is the aspect that the Chazonish is Machadish. It's a very new, innovative aspect, and this is a famous Chazonish in, look at number 18, in Siman Nun, Ois Tes. Now the truth is, to be able to do the sugya properly, you need to get into Machlokes, the Rambam and the Ravid, which we'll mention very briefly. And that is, the Rambam Shita is that when you heat up iron to the point where the iron glows, that's a fire. Even though you'll say, but the iron isn't burning. Is it? Is it not? The iron isn't burning. Remind me, I have to ask you something after. The iron isn't burning. The Rambam says that's Havara. That's Havara. The Ravid learns it's not fire, it's bishul, it's cooking. So you're heating up a piece of metal until it becomes red hot, white hot. The Rambam learns is Havara. Now that is very important because the filament is almost precisely that, where you're heating up a piece of metal till it becomes white hot. That's why many poskim said it was Eish. Because maybe it's not burning, but you see from the Rambam it may not have to burn. Just heating up, fine. But we're not getting into that today. What we're getting into is the Chazonish, the paragraph that begins Oid Yesh Bazeh. Oid Yesh Bazeh, that's on page number 5. Says a Chazonish, Mamish a Peladik a Chiddush.
Is it cooking or heating up? Right?
What?
Between the Rambam and...
Yes, yeah. Oid Yesh Bazeh, Mishum Tikkun Mana. Says the Chazonish, using electricity is Tikkun Mana. I believe that Tikkun Mana is a subcategory of Makeh B'Patish. We know one of the Malachas on Shabbos is, if you have an item that needs one final blow to set it into a completion, the final blow of something is Makeh B'Patish. So turning on an electrical appliance. Now we're not talking about the incandescent bulb, because everyone was, they don't make the incandescent. I went to the store on Wednesday to buy an incandescent bulb. I wanted to show.
No, boy, you can't buy
But
them.
I was able to get it. It's not obsolete, but basically very hard to find it. Okay?
Because you can't.
Legal.
What?
You can't buy them in.
No, they can't make them anymore. You can buy them.
I have one in my car. I have it in the car. Yeah? Okay. Says, if you use an electrical appliance, it's tikkun mana. Why? Because you're allowing it to have the final touch to work. For it to have the electrical current always. So in other words, you have a blender, you have a fan. So what's a fan? A fan is a pole with a battery in it, with two things, with two...
Blades.
Two blades. It's missing something. What's it missing? The operative quality, the electrical current. Accessing or activating electrical current is the final blow that gives the product its final touch. That's tikkun mana. Not yet. No, that's makeh b'patish. In other words, the kli is 99% working, but it's missing one critical ingredient. So it's a makeh for it to be effective. Yeah.
Couldn't you say the first time?
Now look what he says. More than that, maybe it's not just makeh b'patish. The karoiv hadavar, the zeboine min haTorah. It could be you're building something. What do you mean I'm building something? Yeah, what am I building? Ka'isa kli. I'm making a kli. No, making a vessel is binyan. Now there's a rule, ain binyan bekalim, which means if you build something on a kli, that's not binyan. But says the Chazon Ish, I'm not building something on a kli, I'm building the kli. What do you mean I'm building the kli? But I thought it was 99% functional. No. I'll make the case. It was 0% functional. You have a stick with two blades. What percent is working right now without pressing the button? 0. It's worthless. You have a blender with two blades. What are you going to do? It's a hat? 99%. What are you going to do? You're going to come into it's a new Borsellino. Paint it black. It's a new hat. It's worthless. You turn it on. It's alive. You built it. In other words, there's no binyan b'kalim. If you put a tchotchke on a kli, there's no binyan in kalim. But if you make a kli, that's binyan. So it says the Chazon Ish, an electric appliance without a current is dead like a doorknob, dead like a cucumber, and deaf like a cucumber also. It's nothing. You gave it life. But kosher came kan. So you'll say, maybe you make the case, but no, maybe it's something without... Listen to this. But if it's a kli that's plugged into the wall, you ready for this? So you want to say if I press the button on my handheld fan, that's not binyan? But what if I plug the fan into the wall? Now it's connected to the karka? That's not binyan b'kalim, that's binyan b'karka. That is binyan. Anything attached to a house is binyan b'mechuber l'karka. But I believe the Chazon Ish holds that if a painting falls off the wall on Shabbos, you can't put it back up. Why? It's binyan b'karka. It's attached to the house. The house is attached to the wall, to the ground. Says the Chazon Ish, "V'koshken kan shekol achutin mechubaron labayis." All the wires are attached to the house. B'havalei keboine b'mechubar. It's like building on something attached to the ground. V'in kan mishumein binyan b'kalim. The rule of there's no building in kalim doesn't apply. Eladinoi kemechubar. It's like it's attached. Deyesh by mishum binyan v'stira. You flick on the switch. Before flicking on the switch, you plug it in. That's binyan. You unplug it. That's stira.
Just the plugging it in is the binyan. After turning it on, he's saying.
Well, also I would say he's saying if you flick the switch, what you're doing is you are building something. In other words, why building something? Your light bulb is not working. Your ceiling fan is not working. By flicking the switch, you are adding a part to something right? Adding a part to something attached to the ground to make it work is binyan. So you're adding a part to something attached to the ground to make it work. That's binyan. Now the Chazon Ish, in the final paragraph, invokes a very interesting halacha of why binyan or makeh b'patish would apply in this case. You'll say, what do you mean? How could it be binyan? I'm not adding anything. Everything was there already. So he says this is similar to winding a watch, where the Chayei Adam says you can't wind the watch on Shabbos because it's tikkun mana. What do you mean tikkun mana? I'm not fixing anything. It's not broken, but you're adding an element, an ingredient that makes it functional. Adding an ingredient to something that makes it functional is tikkun mana, is makeh b'patish. Says the Chazon Ish, the same thing over here. Adding an ingredient to something that makes it functional is tikkun mana. Now, one of the most critical analysis of this Chazon Ish was written by Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. We mentioned Wednesday that Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach wrote an entire sefer on electricity called Ma'orei Eish, where he addresses this. Also, in the Tshuvas Minchas Shlomo, Siman Yud Aleph, he analyzes this psak of the Chazon Ish very carefully to the point where Rav Shlomo Zalman wrote 2 letters to the Chazon Ish, and the Chazon Ish wrote back 2 letters to Rav Shlomo Zalman. And the Rav Shlomo Zalman prints both of these letters of the Chazon Ish in the introduction to Tshuva Yud Aleph in Minchas Shlomo, where the Chazon Ish is trying to explain his opinion of why he believes. Okay, there are a number of elements here. Number 1, adding the electrical current is tikkun mana. In other words, you're adding an ingredient to make something functional. Number 2, binyan. Why binyan? Because it's not binyan b'kelim. You're building the kli. It's dead without you. And if it's attached to the house, it's not ein binyan b'kelim. It's binyan b'mechum l'karka. And Rav Shlomo Zalman addresses all of these issues. And I want to read to you certain select parts. I just want to tell you that Rav Shlomo Zalman, of all areas, he was considered a very big bucky in electricity. Just you have on your sheet here, number 28, Rabbi Vayakhel Yosef is talking about the hearing aid, and he writes how, he says, Yedidi. Now it's very interesting how he gives different titles to different Gedolim. Rav Shlomo Zalman he calls Yedidi. You know, you ever look at a picture of Shlomo Zalman? You look at him. He's your friend, right? Yedidi. The Chazon Ish, he doesn't call Yedidi, he calls him Moifes Hadar. Yeah, the Vayakhel calls the Chazon Ish the Moifes Hadar. But he says Rav Shlomo Zalman, with his tremendous bekios, especially in this inyan, he showed me clearly how it works. So you see, Rabbi Vayakhel is saying that he brought Rav Shlomo Zalman down to explain to him exactly the operation and mechanism of electricity. Rav Shlomo Zalman, take a look at number 19.
How long ago was Chazon Ish?
A long time ago.
50s.
Take a look what he says. He says, the Sefer, look at number 19. He says, the Sefer Chazon Ish, Chilek Orachayim, Siman Nun Ois Tes. After he discusses the Rambam and the Rabbi that we mentioned, he says, he's quoting the Chazon Ish who says it's tikkun mana because you're allowing the mechanism to work, and it's close to binyan min haTorah, like making a kli. That's the first quote. Then he has another quote from the Chazon Ish. Look about a third of the way down. The first word on the lines are Hu Soiser Ad Kan Lashana. He finishes quoting the Chazon Ish. Says Rav Shlomo Zalman, you should know, V'yadua shedvarav heim chidush gadol ad ma'od. Everything the Chazon Ish is saying here is a tremendous chidush. That it's tikkun mana, that it's binyan. He says, "V'chol eila shenoisiv v'noisim binyanei chashmal." Any paisek, whoever dealt with electricity, lo yizkiru klal achshis v'lamlacha shabanim seiser. No paisek, not the Melamed Lahayal, not the Marsham, not Rav Chaim Moiser, not Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank. Nobody who ever dealt with electricity ever invoked binyan and stira or tikkun mana. Says Rav Shlomo Zalman, I heard the Chazon Ish took it even further. That if you have an electronic flashlight with no batteries in it. Or you have an electric appliance, or you have a light switch, but there's no light plugged in. If you turn it on, you're over an Isser Dairaisa even though nothing's happening. Why? Because you're completing the circuit. You're completing the circuit. Yeah, on Tuesday, of course now. On Shabbat. Why? In other words, why? You hear the case? You have a flashlight with no battery in it, and you press on. Says the Chazon Ish would say it's an Isser Dairaisa on Shabbos.
No, if you have no batteries.
No battery.
They're not completing.
Of course you are.
Why?
There's no battery.
There's nothing in there.
Only a regular switch.
No, you're connecting the wires. You're completing the circuit. You still need fuel. You still need you need electrical current, but you're completing the circuit. In other words, listen.
You're attaching the two sides.
You're attaching the two. You're building a kli that's now right to have electricity. Listen to what he says. He says v'yadua. He says, I heard more. Even when there's no electricity yet. When you press the button, you didn't do anything. Closing the circuit to be prepared. Okay, it's irrelevant how it's going to happen. I'll give you another example. Yeah, the circuit is off. The electricity in the... Right? Con Ed says, sorry, for the next 2 days there's no electricity. So you have no electricity coming into your house. If you go over to the switch and you turn it... Right, it was off. You turn it on and nothing's happening. You're over in Isser Dairaisa according to the Chazon Ish. But what do you mean no electricity is flowing through? You don't need... Without the electricity. The electricity is making it tikkun mana. This is still binyan. How? You're building something and something that's attached to the ground. What am I building? I'm building a kli that is now an appropriate vessel to be able to house electrical current.
Oh, wow. This is on Shabbos I did that.
Yeah. Yeah. Not only that, says Rav Shlomo Zalman, I saw from Rav Greineman, I think Chazon Ish's nephew, that he on his own says Misra Denafshe, that according to Chazon Ish, even if it's not attached to electrical current, it's binyan. Says Rav Shlomo Zalman, my opinion is that I argue on the Chazon Ish, but even the Chazon Ish would only say that it's the added electrical current that transforms the vessel from maves to chayim. That's the tikkun mana. In other words, adding the electrical current that makes a fan broken and now it's fixed, that added aspect, that's the binyan, that's the makab b'pantish, right? He says, listen carefully. That's only if you create a new aspect that it appears beforehand it was dead and now it's alive.
So if you have a switch in your hand, it's not attached to anything. If you close that switch, are you doing anything?
What do you mean it's not attached?
No, you go to the store. You go to the store. They sell switches.
Oh,
you pick it up and you flip the switch.
No, because that
is that.
I would say first of all,
is that bony according to the?
Well, it depends.
It's not attached.
It's not attached to anything. But he was saying even though he was saying even without it being attached. But no, I would say it's still not a kli. It's still not a kli. It's still not a kli to be able to receptive to electricity because it's not even attached to the electricity yet, right? What? No. There it's a kli. Now you just have to put in the battery. Here you have to take the thing and you have to install it. It's not installed yet. You wouldn't say it's missing it. In other words, I would say it's like a Lego piece.
Except it's muktzah. The switch.
Yeah. So it says.
His son will edit that extra chum.
Correct. And
we don't agree with that.
He's saying I would not agree that the Chazon Ish would say that.
Someone else doesn't agree with it.
Correct. Right. Now listen to what he says. He says. He says, I feel that if it's not attached to electricity yet, it's not boina mamish, it's only grama. Now listen to what he says about.
This is Reb Shlomo.
Yeah, about the last one line is Vayakhel. Vayakhel shezeh hayat tmo be'enai. Since the Chazon Ish's position is very questionable in my eyes. It was so strange to me to say that to create an electrical current in an appliance is baina, that I wrote him a letter. I say, it's not like baina, it's like taking a wick and putting it into oil. Would anyone say taking a wick and putting it into oil is binyan? No, of course not. Right? So I feel completing the circuit,
it's the same.
it's not boina. What am I building? I'm just now allowing the wick to be able to draw fuel. That's the analogy he uses. Or like this. Let's say like this. Yeah, Mr. Zoll can help me understand things with the analogy of the water. So Rosh Hashanah uses that. Imagine you have a sink, and from the sink, instead of it going down into the drain, you have like a tube. The water is going down a tube diagonally down to your bathroom floor. So you want to have some fun. You're going to stick your toothbrush into the tube so that the water washes it down to the floor. Would anybody say you're over any isurim by sticking your toothbrush into the tube that the water is carrying the toothbrush down? No, you're just making use of a force that happens to be there. So completing a circuit is just making use of a force that's already there. It's just like water. He says, it's like using a stream of water to cause motion. You stick a cup into a river so that it should flow from here. Well, you're not doing anything. It's not a malacha. Now this is the main argument Rav Shlomo Zalman uses against the Chazon Ish, and I saw written that supposedly this is the argument Rav Moshe accepted, and why Rav Moshe did not accept this psak of the Chazon Ish that it's binyan. And that's the following: that any kli, you want to say it's binyan b'mechumel karka? I have a question for you. If you open a door, is that soiser on Shabbos? Here, you had a wall, you just knocked it down. And when you close the door and you lock it, binyan, you just added something to your wall. No, but you made a hole in your wall. It used to be a complete wall, and now you made a hole in it. And now so it's stira. And the door is open, you close it, you built the wall. Why is that not binyan and stira? It's not a kli, it's mechubel karka in lecha. You can't try getting the door off the hinges. You can't do it. It's made in a way to open and close. It's not building and destroying. It was made to open and close. That's what it's made for. Nobody would say by opening a door you're destroying the wall. That's what the wall is made for. That's why you have hinges on the door. And nobody would say it's when closing the door you're building a wall. That's what it's made for. Says Rosh Hashanah Zalman, opening electricity. What is it? When you open and close it, it's just opening and closing a door. It was made to open and close. You're not building anything by turning on the appliance. You're building the appliance. The appliance was made that you should flick it on. And it was made that you should flick it off. He says, V'gam, kivan shehalachitza b'kaftar l'ftach alizgar magalhu davar kal. 1 second. V'gam kivan, and he says it's considered something very easy. Hareza kori rak b'shem hishtamshus. Now, the argument that I just said is not actually in those lines. I want to show it to you because that is the main argument of Rosh Hashanah Zalman, and I want you to be able to see that. One second.
But Reb Shlomo Zalman holds that you can't do it anyway, even though he holds that way.
Not true.
No? Didn't you tell us the other day?
Yeah, you can use a light bulb. Bottom line is, Reb Shlomo Zalman says he doesn't know of any isser of using an electrical appliance on Shabbos. But he says don't do it.
That's what I said.
But I just want to show you that argument that he says. 1 second. Turn over your sheet. He says
To where?
to where it says Amud Tzadik Tes. Marsham. Listen to Shenchesh Shehevi. Did the Rago Bakach? if you're one second, on the fifth line, 6. V'avshalei nemar sham al guf habinyan mikol makom harei yiskarnu d'b'chai gavna sheyesh tzir. If you have a hinge, shaper mutter gam b'guf habinyan. Something that has a hinge, not only you're allowed to open and close on a vessel, on a kli, but you're even allowed to close on your house. How are you allowed to open your window? You're making a hole in the wall. How are you allowed to close the window? The answer is, that's what it's made for. Is it an Isser D'Rabbanan to open your window?
No.
Of course not. No, not even in Hillcrest. Even in Hillcrest you could open your window on Shabbos. Right? Even if there's no Eruv. Nothing to do with that. Right?
Surely you
right? So you're allowed to open your window. You're allowed to close your window. So says Reb Shlomo Zalman, the second bottom line. He says, one second, excuse me, Kalim. Al kapanim shoghnach harav sim shnir gimel sivchav kshakaz l'inin kli shal prakim shem hadkam b'chazik b'inin shetzarach lazeh gvur v'omnas avagav shebinin gam l'chayim shem boina. That's only if you make it that it should last for a long time, and if it's not made that it should last for a long time, it's a binyan arai. So Shlomo Zalman is saying a few nekudas. Number one, the same way you're allowed to open and close a door on Shabbos, you're allowed to open your light switch and close your light switch. It's just like a door; it was made to open and close, and anything that was not made to exist for a long time is not of temporary binyan. So when you turn on the light, you're only doing it temporarily. How long are you going to keep the light on? Till you go to sleep at night. So anyway, it's not a binyan kavua, it's a binyan arai. And what I heard is that this is Moshe also agreed to, that this argument of binyan Chazon Ish is that Moshe does not accept. However, Chazon Ish, now back to Shlomo Zalman just for one more moment. He says, "Uleachar shekibalti mimenu tshuva kitzara." This is back on page 5, about 8 lines up. After I got a short letter from Chazon Ish, kasafti lo yoid michtav, I wrote him another letter. Veheshav li gam alav, and he wrote me back another letter. But I did not write him a third letter. Why?
Because he doesn't agree.
Out of respect, and I was afraid of the Chazon Ish. He says, "Ach menei hakavod v'hayira shuv lekasafti klum." Says Reb Shlomo Zalman, I am going to bring down for you, reader, the 2 letters of the Chazon Ish. But I want to tell you something. When I write in my tshuva now, he has a lengthy tshuva about the word of the Chazon Ish, you should know, I'm not arguing with him. Because if I was afraid to write a third letter when he was alive, then I'm even more afraid to write it la'achar patirasam, because tzaddikim are greater la'achar patirasam. So you should know, it's not the pshat, I waited till the Chazon Ish, till he went to the Olam HaEmes, and now I'm responding. You should know, no. If I had Yira from the Chazon Ish, and if Reb Shlomo Zalman was afraid of the Chazon Ish, some of the leaders in Israel should also, be thinking about that also. Reb Shlomo Zalman says, I would not write a third letter to Chazon Ish, I pashut had Yira. And whatever I'm writing now is only b'derech machamto shel Torah. The more I write it out, maybe it will become clarified. But chas v'shalom, I'm not being misvakeach, but I'll explain it more at length. And he says, efshar al yidei maso matan kedarka shel Torah, it will become clearer. Now I want you to know, the Chazon Ish sort of addresses of Shlomo Zalman's taina that it's not a permanent binyan. And he says the following. This is in the first letter Chazon Ish wrote to Rav Shlomo Zalman. By the way, Chazon Ish writes how happy he was, how much simcha he had to get a letter from Rav Shlomo Zalman. He says the following. This is in the first letter, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines from the bottom. V'loi dami ledeles v'kisoy kelem. So I have a question. If you have a kli, if you have a teapot, a kettle, are you allowed to open the vessel and close the vessel? Right? You have a teapot. It has a cover.
You mean on Shabbos?
Yeah.
The steam coming in.
No, stam. There's no water, nothing in it. You have a pot. Are you allowed to put a cover on the pot on Shabbos?
If it's you're not using it.
You're building. You're building. Not building. But you put it on. You take it off.
It's a thing of muktzah, no?
Oh, maybe
it's empty.
It's a soup pot. It's a soup pot.
You just said it's empty.
But that's fine. You could use a pot. You want to fill up water with something. Put a pot in muktzah. Anything. Something that has a cover. You're allowed to cover something like a kli on Shabbos, of course. Why? Because you're going to open it, you're going to close it. It's not binyan. It's made to open and close. A door is made to open and close. Says the Chazon Ish, electricity is different. Electricity is not made to open and close. Electricity is made to open. The only reason you close it is because you don't want to pay the electric bills. Electricity is not made to close.
You say the same thing about
Wait,
water.
electricity is made to close? Well, what good is your fan when it's not on? It's worthless. It's dead.
You make the same argument about water.
Yeah, well.
You turn off the water because you don't want to pay the water bill. Otherwise, why not leave
No,
it
but
on?
water there's no issue with, right? But the door, you don't close the door. You close the door. Now you want it closed. Now you want it open. Now you want it closed. Now you want it open. Says the Chazon Ish, with electricity, it's meant to be on. The only reason you keep it off is you don't want the house to burn down. You don't want to pay for it. But there's nothing inherent that somebody wants it off, unless you can say, yeah, I do want it off. I want to go to sleep. I don't want the light on. The Chazon Ish draws a distinction between the door of a house and electricity, and therefore he feels, bottom line, it's binyan. Now this concept of binyan, Rabbi, according to Chazon Ish, would apply to light bulbs, but to all electrical appliances. And what about Yom Tif then? Yom Tif also. So all those psakim, we hear some places matter certain things on Yom Tif, they're obviously not holding like the Chazon Ish, but Chazon Ish would tell them there's no difference between Shabbos and Yom Tif. Binyan is also on Shabbos, Binyan is also on Yom Tif. Tikkun Mana is also on Shabbos, it's also on Yom Tif. All these, as far as the Chazon Ish, apply equally to Yom Tif. So this is another part of the Binyan, another wire in the circuit of the topic of electricity. Rabbi say, have a wonderful Shabbos, and try to be Mekayim the Inyan of Loisevaru Eish, B'chol Moshe V'Seichem, B'yom HaShabbos. All the best. Shkoyach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.